Hi there, welcome to Huson DIY. My name's Ben. In this video we're installing some LED light rings onto a beer pong table. So this is going to be part of a bigger video series I'm doing, the creation of a beer pong table, which if you want to see the full video I'll link to in this video. What we're doing is we're installing some LED rings underneath a beer pong table. So this video will be the wiring, the installation, and then the configuration of WLED on a Node MCU. So I'll go through everything step by step, the powering of the LED rings, the wiring of the LED rings, configuration of WLED, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, everything works. As I say, this is part of a bigger video series I've done of the creation of the beer pong table, but I wanted to concentrate and do a single video on this section just to give some more information on how I achieved what we did with the beer pong table. Okay, sit back, enjoy. Most of it will be time-lapsed, but at each section that's important, I'll jump in and explain what I'm doing. Okay, just to show you some of the parts I'm using. So I've got a power supply. This is a 5 volt 20 amp power supply. So I've got, in total there'll be 240 LEDs, multicolored LEDs. So I'm going worst case scenario at 60 milliamp per LED, which is about, I've calculated it's about 14,000 milliamp, so 14 amp. So the 20 amp is more than capable. You know, if I want to add on things further to it at a later date, then there's further capability in that. So I'd rather have more than not enough, just to be kind of on the safe side. And then what I'm installing are these LED rings. So let me open this one and show you. It's like a NeoPixel ring, but like a cheaper version. Hopefully you can see that on camera. So there's 12 addressable LEDs per ring, and on the back there's some solder pads on the back for signal in, 5 volt ground signal out. So I have to do individual power in to each of these rings. So the wiring and the soldering is going to be quite laborious, quite a task, because I've got 20 of these rings to do. So I'll get the table now, show you where it's going to go, show you where I'm planning to put the power supply, and you kind of visualize how it's going to look. Okay, so this is the underneath of the table. You can see the resin I've made done there. So the idea is that the LED ring, so this ring, will sit on the resin there, shine through the resin up to the other side of the table. So there's 10, so this is one half of the table, there's two halves that fold together. So I've got 10 LED rings on this side, so 10 will go in there, and 10 on the other. That's where the 240 LEDs come from. Got the power supply here, and I've fitted this into the side. So this is where you'll be able to put a kettle lead in, and I'll do some wiring on the other side into the power supply. Obviously then the power supply will come out, some wiring out of the power supply down to the LED rings this side. I'm then going to create another power supply for the other half, just using a barrel connector. So there'll be a barrel connector sat in here, and a barrel connector to the other half of the table, and you just connect the two together when you want to use the table. When you're not using the table, it can be unplugged and the wiring will be safe. So that's the plan. Probably just need to work out where I'm going to run the wiring now, just to get things going. So at the moment I've got the table laid out here. I've just got my wire, some LED control wire. I'm just going to work out where I'm going to run the cabling. So I'm also going to run the power, so my live ground and signal cable all the way down to the first one, number 1. So each ring needs an individual power and ground. So what I'm going to run the power to the first one, use a splitter at the first one and run power and ground. And I'll have a 3-way splitter, so I'll continue the power onto number 2, and have a splitter at number 2 and do it that way. I'm going to use a splitter so I don't have to do as much soldering, and hopefully a little bit safer with them being I'll glue all the splitters down individually under each one, so it's all nice and safe. So we'll get cracking with that now. I'll do that in time lapse, just to show you, just to speed that process up. Okay, I just wanted to explain the first one before I do the time lapse on them all. So what I've done is I've got the power and the ground wires coming from the supply. I've got them into a Wago clip there. So I've used Wago clips loads, and the Wago clips support this gauge of wire. So I've got a separate Wago clip, or Wago clip, however you say it, for the ground and the power. I've then got it split. So I've got a cable coming off it, or a wire coming off it, that will go and power the ring, that number 1 ring. And I've got a second wire coming off that will go and power the number 2 ring. So each hole will have 2 splitters, and I'll split off the power and the ground for each one. The signal cable is slightly different. So the signal cable, I've got it there. So that'll come from the Node MCU, the signal cable. That'll go into the first ring, and the ring actually has an in and out for the signal for the data. So there'll be data into the ring, and I'll have another cable coming out of the ring to number 2. So it'll go 1 to 2 to 3, obviously. Just a small length of cable between each one for the data. So I'll pop it into time-lapse mode now, and I'll do this side of the table. Okay, so all the wiring's in and into the Wago clips now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some solder onto the pads on the back of this. So just going to put some dabs of solder on, ready to solder it to the wire. Okay, so that's one soldered, connected. I've just connected it to some power, just down there, just to test it. See that working fine. So just got 19 more to do. Progressing nicely. Wired in 4 altogether. All working as we're going along. Looking good. Okay, everything's wired up. All the LED rings, after a few nights of a lot of work, are all wired up, all working. So next thing, I want to connect the tables together end to end and sort out the wiring between the two tables. Okay, so this section of the video, we're going to install WLED onto the Node MCU. So I've got the Node MCU here. It's bog standard, nothing special. I've got it plugged into a breadboard because that's where we're going to do the wiring to the rest of the beer pong table. So that's plugged into the breadboard. I've got a micro USB cable plugged in there, and the other end of it plugged into my PC. So you need to do the same with yours. And then what I've done previously, I've used different software to install onto the Node MCU. What I've noticed is it looks like you can do it on the WLED site. So I'll put a link in the description to this, but it's install.wled.me. This is the web installer. So the instructions are on the screen, as hopefully you can see. So I've plugged my ESP, which is my Node MCU, into the USB port. It says it'll install WLED 0.13.3. So I'm going to click install. Hopefully it'll pop up and it'll select the Node MCU with the USB COM port. If it doesn't do that for you, you might need to just unplug, replug in, check device manager. So I've got device manager open here. So check your device manager just to make sure it's accepting the Node MCU. Sometimes you need to use a different USB cable because it doesn't support the connection. So check that. So we'll go ahead, I'll click install. It's got my COM port 3 for USB 2 serial there. So I'll click connect. Okay. So you can see it's got previous version of WLED on here already. Okay, so you can see it's got the WLED software already on there. What I'm going to do, just to show you that you can do it, I'm going to actually reset the Node MCU. So I'm going to unplug. I'm going to hold down reset and plug it in. Okay, so I've released the reset button now. Let's click install on here again. Okay, so now you can see it's wiped that old version of WLED off this Node MCU. That's gone now. And I've now got the option to install WLED from scratch, which is exactly what I want to do. So this is what you'll see. If you've never done the WLED before on your Node MCU, this is what you'll see. So I'll click on install WLED. It's asking me if I want to install it. I do. It's going to erase all data. That's fine. Click install. So it's erasing the data that's on there, which is nothing anyway, really, because I've reset it. Right, so it's installing now. So you can see, but hopefully see on camera the blue light flashing away. Okay, it's 100%. So you've got the solid blue light on there now of installation complete. So I'll hit next on that. So you can do the network configuration straight from here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to input my Wi-Fi details. Before I do take the table to my brother's, I will be putting his network details in, but I'll just do this solely based on my network now. So if I go with my network name, which is not in capitals, it's Huson Unify. Password. That one. I'm going to click connect. So this now hopefully will connect the Node MCU with the WLED firmware on there directly to the Huson Unify Wi-Fi network. Fingers crossed anyway. I'm able to connect. Okay, let's try again. Now that isn't necessarily a 2.4 gigahertz network. So what I'm going to try a specific 2.4 gigahertz network, because some of these devices do need that. So I do have another one. It's not in capitals, which is called Huson Unify _IoT. Connect to that one. So this is on the 2.4 gigahertz band, Wi-Fi band, I know it's for definite. There we go. So the device is connected to the network now. So what we'll do, we'll click straight on visit device, which should hopefully open up in a browser. So you can see there that it's got it on the on my local Wi-Fi. It's given an IP address on my Wi-Fi, and we've got full control straight away on there. So in here, as I said before, I will change these settings before I take the table to James's house and put his Wi-Fi details in, but we won't worry about that for now. The only thing I will be doing is I do need to set up the amount of LEDs there are. So as I mentioned before, there are two parts of the table, 120 LEDs on each side. So all I need to do at this point, hopefully, is add in how many LEDs there are in total. In here, it does let you know how many, what power supply you need, depending on how many LEDs you're using. Tons of other stuff you can do in terms of the different functionality with buttons, other stuff like that. But for us right now, all we need to do is select how many LEDs there are, which I forget where it is. Okay, there we go. So LED preferences, it's there. So I've got 240 LEDs. And there we go, as mentioned before, 240 LEDs at the top there. It's suggesting a 14 amp power supply. So as is a 20 amp power supply, which is more than enough and allow us to expand anything else we want to add to the table at a later date. So I've changed that to 240. That's fine there, the type of LEDs I have. I'm pretty sure it's RGB. I'm going to save that. And there we go. So in the LED preferences here, you can do other things as I mentioned before. You can change the GPIO output you've got on your Node MCU. So depending on which output you're using on your board will depend on which one you choose here. I'm going to leave that for now and we'll work that out on the Node MCU later. You can also do things like add push buttons on here using different GPIO outputs on the Node MCU as well. And one thing just to look out for, which I've been caught out about this previously, different brands of LED manufacturers do different orders of the green, red, and blue colours for the LEDs. So depending on what that is for your particular LED strip, if you're getting weird colours on your LEDs, this could be the reason why. Sometimes you have to alter the order in which the LEDs are manufactured. So this can be a problem sometimes if you're combining LED strips or different types of LEDs. This can cause problems and you do need to make sure you match those up. Okay, the only other two things I'm going to change are, just for a network perspective, I'm going to change the network name to Huson Pong, as so. save that. Okay, so we've saved that one, so that's the host name changed. So we'll go back to the config, go into user interface, and we'll change the server description up there to Huson Pong there as well. So we'll save that, back, and that is it. So you can see here, if we did have the LED strip connected at the moment, you can change all the different effects, which I'll show some in when we're using the table later. You can add different segments onto there, so you could break down the table into two parts and have two segments to control the segments differently if you wanted to do that. So there's tons of stuff you can do with WLED. I'm not going to cover them in this video. I might cover them in a later date on a further video we do with some other projects. Okay, so that's everything we need to do now. It's a very basic setup we're doing for the WLED, just making sure that we've got the right amount of LEDs programmed into there. Making sure it's connected to the Wi-Fi fine, and before I do take the table to James, obviously I will change that Wi-Fi setting so when he turns it on in his apartment, it auto connects to the Wi-Fi. So you can see on here now everything's done. The info, you can check the info button, and it gives you the option to reboot it and an idea of the signal strength, etc. So that's everything you would need in there. Okay, that's the end of the WLED web installer element. That's the first time I've actually used the web installer. That was so easy to use, to be honest with you. Previously, you had to use a compiler to compile the WLED software and to put it onto the MCU. That's all been done from the web browser, from Edge browser, no install, nothing else. Simply plug it in. It auto-detected the COM port it was on. Really, really, really simple. Easy to configure to the Wi-Fi. Really straightforward, really simple, great feature that I didn't even know that was there. That is absolutely brilliant. So we'll move on now, show you the table, show you what's going on with it, and we'll eventually get it over to James in Manchester. Okay, thank you for watching this video. Hopefully it's been really useful seeing some detail on the electronics that we've gone through with the LED rings, the wiring, the configuration of WLED. I've tried to keep it as kind of not too low level detail, but got into enough detail to show you exactly what we've been doing. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there is a full build video of the whole beer pong table, which again I will link to in the description, which does go into more information regarding other elements of the table which you might be interested in. So please jump over there and have a look at that one if you're interested. But if you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If not, give it a dislike. If there's any questions about anything I've done through the video, any of the elements, any of the wiring or the soldering or the WLED, anything at all, please drop a question into the comments and I will get back to any questions at all. If you want to follow this journey along for Huson DIY, please do subscribe. We've got plenty more videos coming up. We're doing some more WLED configuration on some other builds we're doing. We're doing some LED work away from WLED because it's not got the intelligent addressable LEDs, but we're doing some more LED name signs. So yeah, so if anything interesting like that for you, please do subscribe, follow us along. Hopefully see you in the next video.